Mexico has just sent a message that Washington did not expect, and the shock did not come from a military threat, a border confrontation, or a shouting match between presidents. It came from diplomacy. A quiet statement linked to Japan's role in Mexico suddenly turned into something much bigger, a signal that Mexico may no longer be willing to remain trapped inside America's shadow. For years, the United States treated Mexico as its closest production partner, its border security partner, and its economic backyard. But now, Mexico is moving in a different direction. It is opening doors to Asia. It is strengthening industrial ties with Japan. It is positioning itself as a manufacturing power that does not need to wait for Washington's permission. And that is exactly why this moment matters. Because when the Japanese ambassador spoke about Mexico's importance, investment potential, and strategic value, it did more than praise a partner. It reminded the world that Mexico is not just a neighbor of the United States. Mexico is becoming a global industrial battlefield, and the United States knows it. The timing could not be more sensitive. Washington and Mexico are already under pressure over trade, security, migration, tariffs, manufacturing, and the future of the USMCA. American officials want stronger control over supply chains. They want to reduce dependence on China. They want factories closer to home. But here is the problem. Those factories are not automatically coming under American control. Many of them are moving into Mexico. And not only American companies are interested. Japanese companies, Korean companies, Chinese suppliers, European manufacturers, and global investors are all watching Mexico carefully. They see highways, they see ports, they see skilled labor, they see access to North America, and most importantly, they see a country that sits right beside the largest consumer market in the world. This is where the story becomes explosive. Because if Japan strengthens its industrial presence in Mexico, it changes the balance. It means Mexico can become a bridge between Asia and North America. It means Japanese automakers, electronics companies, machinery firms, and advanced manufacturers can use Mexico as a platform to serve the US market. And Washington understands what that means. It means Mexico gains leverage. For decades, the US had one major advantage. Mexico needed access to the American market. But now America also needs Mexico. It needs Mexico for cars, electronics, minerals, agriculture, logistics, border stability, and supply chain security. That gives Mexico power. And when Mexico begins attracting major Asian investment, that power grows even more. This is why the Japanese ambassador's message hit harder than many expected. It was not just a friendly diplomatic comment. It was a reminder that Mexico has options. Mexico can work with the United States, but it can also work with Japan. It can negotiate with Washington, but it can also welcome Asian investment. It can remain part of North America, but still build global partnerships beyond American influence. And that is what shocked Washington. Because the United States is used to thinking of Mexico through one lens: border, migration, security, and trade. But Mexico is now demanding to be seen as something else, a strategic power in its own right. President Claudia Sheinbaum's government has already been sending strong signals about sovereignty. Mexico does not want foreign pressure deciding its internal politics. It does not want outside governments treating Mexican territory like an extension of their own strategy. And it does not want economic decisions dictated entirely by Washington. This is not a small shift. This is Mexico saying, "We will cooperate, but we will not kneel." And that message becomes even stronger when Japan enters the picture. Japan is not just any country. Japan is one of the world's most advanced industrial economies. It has deep experience in automobiles, robotics, electronics, precision manufacturing, infrastructure, batteries, and clean energy. If Japanese companies expand in Mexico, they do not just bring money. They bring technology, training, supply chains, and long-term industrial confidence. That is why this story is not only about diplomacy. It is about factories. It is about jobs. It is about who controls the future of North American manufacturing. For the United States, this creates a complicated situation. On one hand, Japanese investment in Mexico can help reduce dependence on China. It can strengthen North American supply chains. It can make the region more competitive. But on the other hand, it also means Washington cannot fully dominate the process. Mexico becomes the gatekeeper, and that is exactly where the tension begins. Imagine a Japanese company building parts in Mexico for cars sold in the United States. Imagine battery components, electronics, or industrial machinery being produced in Mexican factories with Asian capital and North American access. Mexico wins jobs, Japan wins market access, the US gets supply chain benefits, but it also loses some control. That is why Washington watches these developments very carefully, because every new factory in Mexico is not just a business project, it is a geopolitical move. And now, Mexico appears to understand this better than ever. The old Mexico waited for decisions from Washington. The new Mexico wants to negotiate from strength. This is why the title of this story matters. Mexico shocks the United States after an unexpected statement by the Japanese ambassador. The shock is not because Japan declared something hostile. The shock is because Japan's confidence in Mexico exposes a reality Washington cannot ignore. Mexico is becoming too important to pressure easily. For years, American politicians threatened tariffs, border closures, sanctions, inspections, migration pressure, and trade restrictions. Those threats worked better when Mexico had fewer alternatives. But if Mexico becomes a magnet for global investment, those threats become more risky. Why? Because punishing Mexico could also hurt American consumers, American companies, American supply chains, and American inflation. That is the leverage Mexico is gaining, and Japan's presence makes that leverage visible. Now let's look at the bigger picture. The world is reorganizing. Countries no longer want supply chains that depend entirely on one region. After the pandemic, trade wars, shipping crises, and geopolitical tensions, companies are searching for safer locations. Mexico is one of the biggest winners of this shift. It is close to the United States. It has trade access. It has industrial zones. It has an experienced manufacturing workforce. And it has become one of the most attractive nearshoring destinations in the world. Nearshoring simply means moving production closer to the final market. For American companies, Mexico is ideal. For Japanese companies that want to serve North America, Mexico is also ideal. And for Mexico, this is a historic opportunity. But opportunity also brings pressure. The United States wants rules. Japan wants stability. Companies want security. Workers want better wages. Mexico wants sovereignty. And every side wants influence. That is why a diplomatic statement can suddenly become a global headline. Because behind every polite word, there is a battle for position. The United States is asking, will Mexico remain aligned with Washington's strategy? Mexico is answering, we will protect our own interests first. Japan is signaling, Mexico is a serious partner. And global investors are watching. This is the moment where Mexico's future could change dramatically. If Mexico plays its cards correctly, it could become the manufacturing center of the Americas. It could attract billions in investment. It could create stronger jobs, improve infrastructure, and become a key link between Asia and North America. But if Mexico fails to manage security, energy supply, water shortages, bureaucracy, and political uncertainty, investors may hesitate. So the question is not only whether Mexico can shock the United States, the real question is whether Mexico can turn this diplomatic momentum into long-term national power. Washington knows this. That is why U.S. officials are pushing hard in trade discussions. They want clarity on rules of origin, auto production, steel, aluminum, agriculture, and economic security. They want to make sure the region works in America's favor. But Mexico is no longer entering those talks as a weak player. Mexico can now say, if you want stable supply chains, you need us. If you want manufacturing close to home, you need us. If you want border cooperation, you need us. If you want to compete with China, you need us. That is a powerful position, and Japan's support makes it stronger. For ordinary Mexicans, this could mean more factories, more jobs, more investment, and more global attention. But it also raises serious questions. Will these jobs pay well? Will local communities benefit? Will foreign companies respect Mexican workers? Will the government invest in infrastructure? Will smaller Mexican businesses be included? Or will only major corporations profit? These are the questions that matter beyond the headlines. Because national power is not only about attracting investment, it is about making sure that investment improves people's lives. Still, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. Mexico is standing between two giants, the United States and Asia. And instead of being squeezed, Mexico is trying to become the bridge. That is why this moment feels different. The United States expected Mexico to remain predictable, but Mexico is becoming strategic. Washington expected Mexico to depend on one market. But Mexico is building multiple relationships. Washington expected pressure to work, but Mexico is learning how to use its location as leverage. And the Japanese ambassador's statement made that reality harder to ignore. This does not mean Mexico and the United States are enemies. They are deeply connected. Millions of families, businesses, workers, and communities depend on that relationship. The two countries share a border, trade, history, security challenges, and economic destiny. But friendship does not mean obedience. Mexico is making that clear. It wants cooperation with respect. It wants trade without humiliation. It wants investment without losing sovereignty. It wants partnership without being treated like a subordinate. And that is exactly the kind of message that can unsettle Washington, because the United States is not used to hearing Mexico speak from a position of confidence. But the world is changing. The rise of nearshoring, the competition with China, the role of Japan, the pressure on supply chains, and the future of North American trade have all created a new reality. Mexico is no longer just a border issue. Mexico is becoming a strategic prize, and every country knows it. Japan knows it, the United States knows it, China knows it, Europe knows it, and Mexico knows it too. That is why the next months could be critical. If U.S.-Mexico trade negotiations become tense, Japan's role could become even more important. If Washington tries to pressure Mexico too aggressively, Mexico may highlight its global partnerships. If Japan increases investment, it could accelerate Mexico's rise as a manufacturing hub. And if Mexico uses this moment wisely, it may gain something it has wanted for decades: respect as an equal player. But there is also risk. The United States could respond with tougher trade demands. American politicians could accuse Mexico of allowing foreign companies to use its territory to bypass rules. There could be pressure over autos, parts, steel, technology, and investment screening. And if political tensions rise, business confidence could suffer. So Mexico must walk a careful line. It must welcome Japan without provoking unnecessary conflict. It must negotiate with the United States without surrendering control. It must attract investment while protecting its workers and communities. It must defend sovereignty while keeping cooperation alive. That is not easy. But Mexico has one advantage that no one can take away: geography. Mexico sits beside the United States. It connects North America with Latin America. It faces the Pacific and the Atlantic. It has access to global trade routes. And now, as companies rethink where to build, that geography has become a weapon of economic power. This is why the Japanese ambassador's statement matters so much. It was not just about Japan. It was about Mexico's new place in the world. The United States heard it, investors heard it, and Mexico's rivals heard it too. The message was simple: Mexico is not waiting anymore. Mexico is positioning itself, and that is why Washington is watching closely. Because the country once seen mainly as America's southern neighbor is now becoming one of the most important economic battlegrounds of the decade. If Japan deepens its partnership with Mexico, the impact could reach factories in Texas, ports in California, auto plants in Michigan, logistics hubs in Arizona, and boardrooms across Washington. This is not a small diplomatic story. This is a signal of a changing order. Mexico wants to be more than a partner. It wants to be a power center. And if the United States does not adjust to that reality, it may find itself surprised again and again. So the real question is not whether Mexico shocked Washington today. The real question is what happens next. Will the United States treat Mexico with more respect? Will Japan expand its role? Will Mexico become the new industrial bridge between Asia and North America? Or will pressure from Washington force a confrontation over trade, sovereignty, and control? One thing is certain: Mexico is no longer silent, and the world is finally paying attention.